there is a silent realization that many people over 60 begin to feel, even without fully understanding what's happening, even without having precise words to describe it, even without being able to point to an exact moment when all of this began. Because there is no exact moment. There is an accumulation. A gradual progression that installed itself so smoothly that for a long time, it was possible to attribute each sign individually to isolated and temporary causes. The body seems to lose strength at the same time the mind slows down. And that simultaneity, that coincidence of declines happening in parallel, is what most disconcerts people. Because it suggests something most people don't expect, that these two processes might not be independent at all. Climbing stairs requires more effort than it did 3 years ago. Not impossible effort, just more. An effort that used to be completely unconscious and now demands attention, planning, sometimes a pause in the middle. Getting up from a chair takes longer. The movement that used to be automatic and instantaneous now passes through a moment of preparation, of gathering strength, of ensuring balance before starting. Walks get shorter, not because the desire to walk has diminished, but because the body starts giving signals that recommend conservation, that suggest going slower is safer, that make the comfortable distance progressively smaller. And alongside all of this, in a way that seems separate, but that is actually deeply connected, come the moments of forgetting. The difficulty focusing that appears in moments that shouldn't be difficult. That strange, growing feeling that mental clarity is no longer what it was, that thoughts arrive a little more slowly, organize with a little more effort, get lost with an ease that didn't exist before. What few people realize, the point that completely shifts the perspective on all of this, is that these changes may be deeply connected. They aren't two parallel, independent processes that simply happen at the same time by coincidence. They're part of an integrated system where mobility, circulation, and brain activity go together in ways far deeper than most people imagine. To understand this connection, it's necessary to understand something about the glutes that goes far beyond the muscular function most people know. The glutes are the largest muscle group in the human body. Not in terms of number of muscles, but in terms of total muscle mass. The gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus together represent a significant portion of the body's total musculature. And large muscles have implications that go far beyond strength and posture. The first role of the glutes that matters for brain health is the circulatory role. When large muscle groups contract regularly, they act as accessory pumps for the cardiovascular system, assisting the heart in moving blood through the body. The leg and hip muscles, when active, facilitate venous return, improve peripheral blood flow, and contribute to cerebral circulation. The brain is absolutely dependent on a constant, efficient, abundant blood flow. It consumes 20% of all the oxygen you breathe, despite representing less than 2% of body weight. Any factor that reduces that flow, less flexible arteries, reduced cardiovascular capacity, sedentary living that diminishes system efficiency, directly impacts neural function. Neurons receiving less oxygen and less glucose function more slowly. Synapses with less vascular support transmit signals less efficiently. When the glutes weaken and movement decreases, this accessory pump stops operating with the same efficiency. And cerebral circulation suffers in ways that translate into exactly the symptoms we're describing. The second role is BDNF production. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is a protein that acts as literal fertilizer for neurons, stimulating the growth of new synaptic connections, strengthening existing ones, and protecting against progressive degeneration. And aerobic and strength exercise is one of the most powerful stimuli for BDNF production that exists. Neuroimaging studies showed that adults who exercise regularly have, on average, larger hippocampal volumes, the brain region most directly associated with memory and learning. Not just in young adults, in adults of all ages, including people in their 70s and 80s. The third role is the reduction of systemic inflammation. Low-grade chronic inflammation. That silent state of immune alert, that inadequate diet, sedentary living, and stress sustained over time is one of the primary accelerators of both muscular and cognitive decline. Common causes for processes that appear separate. Regular exercise, especially that which involves large muscle groups like the glutes, is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory modulators available. It reduces systemic inflammatory markers, improves insulin sensitivity, regulates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and creates progressively more favorable conditions for both muscular and brain health. And the fourth role, perhaps the least obvious and the most fascinating, is the neuromuscular connection. Exercises that require coordination, balance, and motor control need real cognitive resources. When you perform a movement that demands attention, that requires the central nervous system to coordinate multiple muscle groups, monitor body position in space, anticipate and correct imbalances, you are simultaneously exercising the body and stimulating the brain. Areas associated with attention, spatial coordination, motor planning, and procedural memory are activated during this type of exercise in ways that don't happen during automatic exercise or during the isolated mental exercises most people practice. When one improves, the other can respond positively too. It was exactly from the understanding of this deep connection between muscular strength and brain health that specialists identified specific exercises with documented dual benefit. You'll find it at the first link in the description. Today, I'm going to reveal the 3 exercises that most consistently appear at this intersection, that strengthen the glutes while simultaneously stimulating the brain regions associated with memory, focus, and mental clarity. They don't require a gym. They don't need special equipment. They don't demand high fitness levels to start. They are movements that any person over 60 can incorporate into their routine, respecting current limits and building progressively from there. The first exercise is sitting and standing from a chair. It seems too basic to deserve attention in a list of exercises for brain health. But that perception is exactly what makes one of the most functionally relevant exercises for older adults consistently underestimated. The movement of sitting down and standing up from a chair, executed slowly in a controlled and conscious way, is one of the best available indicators of functional strength. Research shows that the ability to rise from a chair without arm support is strongly correlated with longevity, quality of life, and, relevantly for our discussion, cognitive health. At the muscular level, the movement intensely activates the gluteus maximus, quadriceps, hamstrings, and core stabilizing muscles. It's a closed, kinetic chain exercise, the type that most directly simulates real-world demands and produces functional adaptations most transferable to daily activities. At the neurological level, the movement requires active postural control, coordination between multiple muscle groups, proprioception, the awareness of body position in space, and attention to balance. All of these demands recruit real cognitive resources, especially in the circuits associated with executive attention and motor control. How to execute for maximum benefit. Sit completely in the chair, then stand slowly and in a controlled way, without using the arms to push. If necessary, use the arms initially and progressively reduce that assistance. The focus should be on control, not speed. 10 repetitions 2 to 3 times a day is a realistic starting point that can be built progressively. The second exercise is the glute bridge. The glute bridge is an exercise that, for its simplicity of execution and its level of glute and posterior chain activation, occupies a unique position in the list of most efficient movements for older adults. The starting position is simple. Lying on your back, knees bent, with feet flat on the floor at hip width. The movement consists of contracting the glutes and raising the hips until the body forms a straight line from knees to shoulders. The muscular contribution is direct. It intensely activates the gluteus maximus, medius, and the posterior chain muscles, hamstrings, and spinal erectors. It strengthens the musculature that supports the lumbar spine. It improves pelvic stability that is fundamental to gait quality and fall prevention. But the neurological contribution is equally relevant. The glute bridge requires bilateral coordination. Both legs need to work symmetrically for the movement to be executed without compensations. It requires active proprioception, the continuous awareness of hip position in space during the movement. And in the isometric hold version at the highest point, it requires sustained attention to maintain the contraction while the nervous system monitors and adjusts balance. This combination of intense muscular activation with cognitive demands of attention and coordination is exactly the type of exercise that stimulates BDNF production and recruits the neural networks associated with executive control and procedural memory. How to execute? Lie on your back, knees bent. Exhale while pressing feet into the floor and slowly raising the hips. Hold for 2 to 3 seconds at the highest point, maintaining active and conscious contraction of the glutes. Lower in a controlled way. 10 to 15 repetitions twice a day is a starting point. The third exercise is conscious walking. Regular walking is already widely recommended for general health, and there are decades of consistent evidence supporting its cardiovascular, metabolic, and cognitive benefits. But conscious walking is something different. It's regular walking transformed into simultaneous body and mind exercise. The distinction is simple but powerful. Instead of walking on autopilot, thinking about something else, listening to something, processing the day's events, conscious walking requires that attention be present in the very act of walking, in the rhythm of the steps, in the way weight transfers from one foot to the other, in contact with the ground, in the breathing that accompanies the movement, in posture and balance with each step. This directed attention transforms a physical exercise into simultaneous cognitive stimulation. Brain areas associated with executive attention, body awareness, spatial processing, and motor control are activated in an integrated way. The dual task of walking while paying conscious attention to the act of walking creates a cognitive demand that doesn't exist in automatic walking. And it's exactly this type of dual demand that studies show to be particularly effective for stimulating neuroplasticity. Adding progressive variations amplifies the benefit. Intentionally changing pace, incorporating small direction changes, walking on slightly uneven surfaces that require balance adjustments. Each of these variations adds a layer of cognitive demand to the physical exercise. And each additional layer is an additional stimulus for the neural networks we want to keep active and strong. If you want to start this protocol today, with a structured guide showing how to implement these 3 exercises progressively and safely, adapted to where you are right now, what specialists have isolated about this approach is available at the first link in the description. As simple as it always should have been. But there is an emotional part of this story that needs to be told honestly, because physical decline and cognitive decline, when they happen in parallel, when they reinforce each other, when together they create a cycle that seems hard to interrupt, don't just affect the body and mind. They affect identity. They affect how the person sees themselves. They affect what they believe is possible for themselves. Losing physical stability, feeling that climbing a stair or getting up from a chair are tasks that now require attention and effort that didn't exist before, creates an insecurity that doesn't stay confined to the physical. It expands. It begins to influence daily decisions in ways that gradually narrow the world. The person starts avoiding going out alone, not because they can't, but because the risk of a fall, of a stumble, of a moment of instability in public is perceived as too real to ignore. The fear of falling arises, not as an abstract fear, but as a concrete concern present at every staircase, every uneven sidewalk, every surface that isn't completely flat. And alongside the physical fear comes the cognitive fear. The fear of forgetting, of needing help, of becoming a burden, and gradually confidence. That confidence built over decades of competence, of autonomy, of being able to manage one's own life safely, begins to diminish. The problem stops being just physical or just cognitive. It starts affecting freedom, autonomy, and self-esteem in ways that are hard to separate from the person's fundamental identity. But many people believe that aging means accepting muscular weakness and mental slowness as inevitable. And that belief, however widespread, however reinforced by a culture that treats aging as inevitable decline, is being systematically contradicted by the evidence. Modern science on exercise and aging tells a completely different story. Adult skeletal muscle maintains significant capacity for response to training at any age, including advanced decades of life. Studies with adults in their 70s and 80s have demonstrated measurable gains in muscular strength, lean mass, and functional capacity in response to progressive exercise programs. The concept of "it's too late to gain strength" has no support in the evidence. Likewise, the adult brain, even the aging brain, even after decades of sedentary living in low stimulation, retains the capacity to respond positively to exercise through the mechanisms we described. BDNF production, improvement of cerebral circulation, reduction of systemic inflammation, stimulation of executive control and memory networks. And here is the insight that ties everything together. When you strengthen the glutes and functional musculature through the exercises we described, you aren't just investing in mobility and fall prevention. You're simultaneously improving the cerebral circulation that determines how well neurons function, stimulating BDNF production that promotes new neural connections, reducing systemic inflammation that is a common cause of both muscular and cognitive decline, challenging the cognitive systems of attention, coordination, and procedural memory that keep the brain in the state of plasticity that protects it. Body and mind as an integrated system, where strengthening one actively contributes to strengthening the other. 5 minutes today, 10 tomorrow. Consistency across weeks, not perfection, not heroism, not radical transformation that nobody can sustain. Just the correct direction, maintained with the consistency necessary for the system to respond. That is how real changes begin. If you feel the body weakening, the mind slowing, and confidence diminishing, know this clearly. Aging doesn't have to mean losing strength. Doesn't have to mean losing clarity. Doesn't have to mean accepting the progressive narrowing of your world as inevitable destiny. There is a possible, accessible, evidence-based path for strengthening body and mind at the same time, for recovering the confidence to move safely, think clearly, and live with the autonomy you built across an entire lifetime. And that path begins with simple exercises, done the right way, with the consistency that transforms small actions into large changes. The complete method is in the pinned comment. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. In the upcoming videos, I'll keep showing you natural and intelligent strategies to preserve autonomy, strengthen memory, and help you live with more mobility, security, and quality of life after 60.